I had a bad feeling about my own home, so I pretended to go on vacation. But I never left the city. Instead, I rented a rundown room across the street to watch my front door. While I was spying from behind a dirty curtain, an elderly neighbor took me by the hand and whispered 4 words that made my blood run cold. "At midnight, you will see." When midnight came, I couldn't believe what I witnessed. My name is Harold Murphy. I'm 58 years old, and until 3 days ago I thought I was losing my mind. But I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my life. It started on a Tuesday morning at the breakfast table. The smell of bacon usually made me hungry. But lately the mere scent of food made my stomach turn. My hands were trembling as I tried to lift my coffee cup. I had been a construction foreman for 25 years. After my army service, building foundations that could last centuries. Yet now I could barely hold a ceramic mug without spilling. The tremors had gotten worse over the past month. Maxwell Richardson, my son-in-law, walked into the dining room. He didn't say good morning. He never really looked me in the eye. He looked through me like unwanted furniture. He tossed a blue envelope onto the mahogany table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right next to my trembling hand. The envelope was thick, official-looking. "You're going to Florida tomorrow, Pop," he said. He didn't ask. He didn't suggest. He ordered. His voice carried that entitled tone I'd grown to despise over 4 years. I looked up at him. Maxwell was 34 years old, with that confident smile of a man who has never had to work for anything in his life. He called himself successful. "Florida?" I asked, my voice sounding weak and raspy. Why would I go to Florida? The question seemed to amuse him. He poured himself orange juice from my refrigerator. "Because you need rest," Maxwell said, not even looking at me. "Dr. Thompson said your dizzy spells last week were a warning sign. The humidity will be good." I looked at the ticket inside the envelope. One way. He wasn't sending me on vacation. He was shipping me out like damaged goods to be discarded. I looked at Patricia. My beautiful daughter sat across from me, staring into her bowl of oatmeal. She wouldn't look at me. She knew what this really was. "Patricia," I said softly, hoping to reach the girl I'd raised. "Do you agree with this?" My voice cracked slightly. I hated sounding so desperate and weak. She flinched. It was a small movement, but I saw it. She finally looked up and her eyes were filled with tears she was trying to hold back. "Dad, it's for your own good," she said. Her voice sounded rehearsed like lines from a bad play. "Maxwell says you need professional care. We can't watch you constantly. You're getting confused, Dad. You forgot to turn off the stove yesterday." But I hadn't forgotten. I knew I hadn't. I had been an engineer in the Army Corps. Precision was my life. Systems, protocols, attention to detail. But lately, things were happening. Keys going missing, the stove being left on, my wallet appearing in strange places. And this sickness, this constant dizziness and nausea. Dr. Thompson, Maxwell's friend from the golf club, dismissed everything as old age. But something felt wrong about it all. "Fine," I said, surprising them both with my calm acceptance. "I'll go." The relief on Maxwell's face was instantaneous and insulting. He smiled and patted my shoulder condescendingly. "That's a good man, Pop. You pack your bags. The car will be here at 8 a.m. He was already mentally spending my money, I could tell. I went to my room, but I didn't pack for Florida. I packed for war. From my closet, I pulled out my old army duffel bag. Inside went my military binoculars. A small digital camera Leonard Brooks had given me last Christmas. Cash I kept hidden from Maxwell's prying eyes. And most importantly, my service pistol from overseas. I called my old army buddy Leonard that night. He ran a private security company now. I need surveillance equipment, I told him. The kind that works in complete darkness. You in trouble, Harold? Leonard asked. His voice carried concern. We'd served together in the Corps of Engineers. He knew I didn't ask for favors lightly. Maybe, I said. But I need to know for sure. Within 2 hours, Leonard was at my back door with a briefcase full of military-grade surveillance equipment. The next morning, I played my part perfectly. I let Maxwell load my suitcases into the trunk of the luxury sedan he'd ordered. He hugged me condescendingly. Don't worry about the house, Pop, he said, grinning like he'd already won the lottery. We'll take good care of it. His eyes gleamed with barely contained greed. I bet you will, I thought, but kept my face neutral. I got into the car and watched them wave from the porch of my house. My father built this house with his own hands in 1962. I restored it board by board after Dorothy and I got married. It was worth $800,000 now. As soon as the car turned the corner and we were out of sight, I leaned forward to the driver. Change of plans, I said quietly. I held up a $100 bill. Don't take me to the airport. Take me to 4th Street instead. The driver looked confused, but money talks louder than instructions. 4th Street ran directly parallel to my street. The back of the buildings on 4th Street faced the front of my house perfectly for surveillance. I had booked a room on Airbnb using an old email address Maxwell didn't know about. Cash payment, fake name, untraceable. Military habits die hard. The car stopped in front of a crumbling building with peeling paint and broken windows. It was a stark contrast to my pristine house just 1 block over. I dragged my suitcase up 3 flights of stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. My legs felt like lead, but determination pushed me forward. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and damp carpet. It was disgusting, but it had one redeeming quality that made it perfect. The window faced my house directly. I walked to the window and pulled back the greasy curtain. There it was. My house, my life. From this angle, I could see everything. The front door, the living room windows, and the master bedroom balcony where Dorothy used to sit with her morning coffee. The sight brought back painful memories. I opened my suitcase and took out the only thing that really mattered. My military binoculars from my days surveying construction sites in hostile territories overseas. I pulled up a chair and settled in for what I knew would be a long wait. For hours, nothing happened. The house was quiet and peaceful. But I had a feeling in my gut. A feeling I hadn't experienced since I was walking perimeters in dangerous zones during my Army service years ago. The structure was unsound. Something was about to snap. Around 4 in the afternoon, I saw movement in the hallway of this tenement building I was hiding in. I cracked my door open to get some air because the room was stifling hot and the smell of cigarettes was making me nauseous. Standing there was Mrs. Collins. She was 65 years old, sharp as a tack, and had lived in this neighborhood since before it became trendy and expensive. She knew everything and everyone on these streets. She was holding a bag of groceries and looking directly at me with knowing eyes. She looked at me without surprise. She didn't ask why Harold Murphy, the owner of the finest house on the block, was hiding in this dump. I knew you weren't stupid, Harold, she said, her voice rough like sandpaper. There was approval in her tone that surprised me completely. Mrs. Collins, I started to explain, but she cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. Save your breath. You look terrible. Your skin is gray. I feel terrible, I admitted, leaning against the door frame for support. My legs were shaking and I felt weak from whatever was happening to me. She walked over to me and took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong for a woman her age. She pressed something cold and jagged into my palm. I looked down. It was a rusty iron key, old and weathered. That opens the old service gate in your back alley, she whispered conspiratorially. The one your wife Dorothy, God rest her soul, used to use for the garden. She was a good woman, your Dorothy. Too good for this world. Why are you giving me this, Mrs. Collins? I asked, confused by her sudden involvement in whatever was happening to me. What did she know that I didn't? She looked left, then right down the empty hallway, then leaned in close. Her eyes were full of a fear I had never seen in her before. Because you need to see. You need to get close. Your dog Buster didn't die of old age last week, Harold. And you aren't sick from old age either. My blood ran cold at her words. Buster, my German shepherd, had died suddenly 3 days ago. Maxwell said his heart just gave out from being old. What do you know? I demanded, gripping her arm tighter than I should have. Tell me what you know about my dog. Tell me what's happening. She pulled away gently but firmly. I can't say it here. Walls have ears, and that son-in-law of yours has eyes everywhere around this neighborhood. But you take that key. Go to the back garden tonight. Wait in the bushes by the back fence. Hide where you can see everything clearly. She started to walk away toward her apartment, then stopped and looked back at me. Her expression was grave and frightening in the dim hallway light. At midnight, Harold. At midnight, you will see and you will understand everything. And God help you when you do. Her voice carried a weight of knowledge. She disappeared into her apartment, leaving me standing alone in the hallway with a rusty key and a heart filled with growing terror about what I might discover. I went back to my window and raised my binoculars toward my house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the familiar neighborhood streets. The street lights flickered on one by one. My house looked peaceful and normal. Warm golden light spilled from the living room windows like it always had. It looked like the perfect American home. A place where families gather for dinner and children grow up safe. But as the hours ticked by slowly, I watched a transformation begin to take place. At 9 p.m., a white van pulled up in front of my house. Men in black t-shirts got out. They were carrying large, heavy cases that looked like equipment of some kind. They weren't moving furniture or doing repairs. They were bringing something specific inside my house. At 10 p.m., the luxury cars started arriving in a steady stream. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys. Cars worth more than most people's annual salaries parked carelessly along the street. They blocked fire hydrants and driveways without any concern for neighbors or emergency vehicles. These weren't the cars of friends or neighbors visiting for dinner. I watched Maxwell open the front door of my house. He wasn't wearing his usual casual clothes. He was wearing an expensive tuxedo like he was hosting something important. He greeted the men getting out of the cars with handshakes and back slaps. He looked like the owner of the world, confident and in complete control. And then I saw Patricia. My heart broke seeing my daughter in this situation. She was standing by the door wearing a dress that was far too short. She was holding a tray of drinks and greeting guests. But she wasn't greeting them as a hostess would at a family gathering. She was working like hired help. I looked at the clock on the wall. 11:30, Mrs. Collins' words echoed in my mind like a warning bell. At midnight, you will see. I grabbed the rusty key she had given me. I grabbed my binoculars. I left the apartment and ran down the stairs as fast as I could. I ignored the dizziness that threatened to overwhelm me. I ignored the pain in my joints. I crossed the dark alleyway that separated our streets like a soldier. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock of the old iron gate that was covered in thick ivy. It groaned and clicked open. I slipped inside my own backyard like a stranger. I crept through the shadows, moving toward the house I had built. I hid in the thick hydrangea bushes just under the living room window. The music was loud now, thumping through the glass like a physical force. I raised myself up slowly, inch by inch, until I could see through the gap in the velvet curtains. What I saw inside made my breath stop. My living room was gone. The furniture Dorothy and I had collected for 30 years was pushed against the walls or completely missing from the room. In the center of the room were green felt tables, roulette wheels, card tables, and stacks of poker chips. It was a casino operating right in my house. Smoke filled the air thick and heavy. Men were shouting and laughing, throwing stacks of cash onto my antique coffee table like it was worthless junk. But that wasn't what made me nearly faint from shock. I shifted my gaze to the fireplace where something was terribly, horribly wrong. Above the mantel, there had always been a large oil painting of my late wife, Dorothy. It was my most prized possession in the entire world. The painting was gone. In its place was a large digital screen displaying odds and betting information. Cold, mechanical numbers where Dorothy's smile should be. And leaning against the fireplace, waiting to be used as firewood, was the frame of Dorothy's portrait. The canvas had been ripped out and discarded. I felt a sharp pain in my chest like a knife twisting. My vision blurred, the world tilted sideways. The last thing I saw was devastating. Maxwell was standing on a chair, holding up my grandfather's gold pocket watch. He was auctioning it off to a man with a scar across his face. When I woke up, I was lying on Mrs. Collins' floral sofa that smelled of lavender and old dust from decades of careful living. She was sitting in her rocking chair, watching me with eyes that had seen too much history to be surprised by human cruelty and greed. She didn't ask how I felt. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and tossed a small amber glass bottle onto the coffee table between us. It spun and stopped right in front of my face. It had no label, just a residue of glue where one used to be attached. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice sounding like gravel in a mixer. My throat was dry and my head was pounding terribly. "I pulled it out of your kitchen trash 2 days ago," she said, her voice calm and terrifying. "I saw that son-in-law of yours scraping labels off. He was being very careful about it, digging deep in the bin. I didn't think much of it until I saw you shaking yesterday afternoon." She leaned forward in her chair. "It's blood thinner, Harold. Warfarin. High-dose medication. Enough to make your hands shake so you can't sign papers properly. Enough to make you confused so you think you're losing your mind, but not enough to kill you quickly. He wants you slow and weak." I stared at the bottle in horror. The sickness, the dizziness, the tremors that Dr. Thompson said were just part of normal aging and grief. It wasn't age. It wasn't grief. It was murder in slow motion, calculated and deliberate. Maxwell was systematically destroying my health to steal my assets. I spent the next few hours regaining my strength, drinking the strong black coffee Mrs. Collins brewed and eating dry toast to settle my stomach. At exactly 7 a.m., I walked across the street to my house. The sun was shining as if the night before had never happened. The luxury cars were gone without a trace. The street was quiet and normal. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside my own home. I expected to smell stale smoke and spilled alcohol from the illegal gambling operation. Instead, The air was thick with industrial bleach that burned my nostrils. The house was spotless beyond belief. The green felt tables were gone. The furniture was back in place, pushed to their exact original spots. Even the portrait of Dorothy was back over the mantel, though I could see a faint line where they had hastily taped the canvas together. It was a perfect illusion designed to make me think I had imagined everything. But I knew what I had seen with my own eyes. I walked into the kitchen where Maxwell and Patricia were sitting at the island eating pancakes and drinking orange juice like a normal family. The domestic scene was so normal and peaceful it was terrifying. They had cleaned up a federal crime scene in just a few hours. Maxwell looked up and his fork froze halfway to his mouth. For a split second, I saw the panic in his eyes completely unguarded. But then his mask slipped back on. "Pop," he stammered, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the kitchen floor. "You're back. We thought you were on the plane to Florida by now. We missed you so much we were just cleaning up." I gripped the handle of my suitcase so hard my knuckles turned white. I looked at the man who had auctioned off my grandfather's watch. I looked at the daughter who had served drinks to strangers in my home while they destroyed everything I had built in my lifetime. I forced my face into a mask of confusion and fatigue. "I missed my flight," I lied, my voice flat and cold as winter. "And I forgot my heart medication. I need to rest." I walked past them toward my bedroom, leaving them standing there terrified and confused. Over the next few days, Maxwell began his psychological warfare in earnest. I woke up reaching for my glasses on the nightstand every morning. The same spot I had placed them every night for 20 years of habit. My hand found empty wood. No glasses anywhere nearby. I spent 20 minutes crawling on my hands and knees, feeling humiliatingly helpless and confused. Then Maxwell would appear like a savior with my glasses. "Pop, you left these in the refrigerator again," he said, shaking his head with practiced pity. "You really are getting confused about simple things." I knew I didn't put them there. I never went to the fridge at night. But I took them with trembling hands anyway. It didn't stop there with just the glasses. My wallet vanished from my back pocket and reappeared in the bathroom sink, soaking wet. My heart medication was missing from the medicine cabinet, and I found it inside a box of cereal in the pantry the next day. Every time I turned around, Maxwell was there, looming over me, asking, "Pop, are you okay? You seem so confused lately about everything." But I had a plan brewing in my mind. If he wanted a senile old man, I would give him a performance that would convince him completely. I waited until late afternoon when the sun was casting long shadows across the living room floor. Maxwell was in the kitchen making himself a drink. I sat in my rocking chair, the one Dorothy used to knit in, and I started talking to the empty space next to me with affection. "Dorothy, honey, I told you to wear the blue dress," I whispered, my voice soft and loving. I laughed gently, reaching out to stroke the air. I heard the clink of glass in the kitchen stop completely. Maxwell walked to the doorway, his eyes narrowing with suspicion and growing excitement about my condition. "Who are you talking to, Pop?" he asked, his voice tight with barely contained hope that I was finally losing my mind completely and permanently. I looked at him with vacant, glassy eyes, staring right through him like he wasn't even there. "Your mother-in-law," I said, smiling with terrifying serenity. "She's right here, son. Can't you see her? She says you look tired and stressed. She's worried about you working so hard all the time." Maxwell turned pale as a sheet. He looked at the empty chair and then back at me with growing excitement. He thought I was finally breaking. But I had one more card to play. A card so humiliating I knew no man would fake it unless he had completely lost his pride. I filled a small water bottle from the bathroom tap and hid it in my pocket, uncapped and ready. I walked into the hallway where Maxwell was standing. I stopped mid-stride, squeezed the bottle in my pocket, and let the warm water soak the front of my trousers in a spreading stain. I looked down at the dark stain spreading on my beige pants and then looked up at Maxwell with sheer terror and overwhelming shame. I had an accident, I stammered, letting my chin quiver with embarrassment. I didn't feel it coming, son. I'm so sorry about this mess. The look of disgust on Maxwell's face was instantaneous and absolute. He stepped back as if I were contagious with some terrible disease. "Oh God, Pop," he groaned, covering his nose even though it was just water. "That's disgusting. Go change. Just go change your clothes right now." He didn't offer to help me. He didn't show an ounce of compassion or concern. He just turned around and pulled out his phone immediately. I retreated to my room, walking with the shuffle of a broken man. But as soon as I closed the door, I pressed my ear tightly. I heard him dialing frantically. "Dr. Thompson, it's Maxwell," he said, his voice urgent and triumphant. "You need to come tomorrow morning. The old man is completely gone. He's hallucinating, talking to dead people, wetting himself in the hallway. He can't take care of himself anymore. We need those papers signed immediately." I leaned against the door and smiled a cold, hard smile. He had swallowed the bait hook, line and sinker completely and totally. He thought he was winning. He thought I was broken beyond repair. He didn't know he had just invited a witness to his own destruction. While Maxwell thought he was watching me deteriorate, I was busy installing surveillance equipment throughout the house during my supposed confused wanderings around the property. Leonard had provided me with military-grade equipment. I swapped screws on light switch plates with tiny cameras. I replaced outlet covers with recording devices. I installed a hidden camera in the smoke detector right outside their bedroom. Every conversation, every plan, every criminal act was being recorded in high definition. When Dr. Thompson arrived the next morning, I was ready for the performance of my lifetime. I played the confused, declining veteran perfectly for his examination. I stumbled over simple words, forgot basic questions, and even drooled a little for dramatic effect. Dr. Thompson barely examined me at all, as expected. He spent more time talking to Maxwell about cognitive decline and necessary interventions than actually checking my health or mental state properly. But every word they spoke was being recorded in crystal clear high-definition video and audio. Evidence that would destroy them both in court. That evening, while they celebrated downstairs thinking they had won completely, I was in my bedroom accessing the secure laptop Leonard had provided me. I uploaded every video file, every audio recording, every piece of damning evidence I had gathered over the past week of careful surveillance. But I didn't send it to the police immediately. I had learned in the army that you don't show your hand until you're ready. The next morning, Maxwell made his fatal mistake. He got greedy and impatient. I was sitting at the breakfast table when he walked in confidently. He carried a stack of legal documents and a pen. "Pop," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern, "Dr. Thompson says we need your affairs. This is just a power of attorney so Patricia and I can help manage your finances properly. For your own protection against confusion." I looked at the papers with my best confused expression, but my engineer's eye caught something immediately. The signature line was positioned wrong and inconsistent. I picked up the pen with a shaking hand and started to sign my name. But instead, I wrote, "Evidence package sent, FBI." Maxwell looked down at what I had written and his face went white as a ghost. "What the hell is this?" he whispered in shock. I dropped the confused act completely. I sat up straight, looked him dead in the eye, and spoke in my clear commanding voice. "This is checkmate, son. Within 30 minutes, FBI agents were at my door with a warrant. Within 2 hours, Maxwell was in handcuffs facing serious charges. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Audio recordings of him discussing the poisoning, video footage of the illegal gambling operation, financial records showing systematic theft. Patricia cooperated with authorities and received probation in exchange for her testimony against Maxwell. She visits me sometimes, but things will never be the same. The trial was swift and decisive. Maxwell got 12 years in federal prison. The loan sharks got much longer sentences when investigators followed the money. I kept the house. I kept my savings. More importantly, I kept my dignity and self-respect. These days, I spend my time helping other veterans. Mrs. Collins and I have coffee every morning, and I volunteer with organizations that help older adults avoid scams and abuse from family members. Maxwell thought he was dealing with a confused old man. He never realized he was dealing with a combat engineer who knew how to win. The young ones always underestimate us older folks because they think gray hair automatically means weak minds and confused thinking patterns. We built this country with our own hands and sweat, fought overseas for freedom, and we're not surrendering to entitled punks easily.